So we're going to start in ETM, what used to be called Quality Manager. The goal of this tool is to be able to make sure that we're testing the right artifacts. So we can look at a simple test case in here. We're going to do like some basic integrations here and talk about that. The nice thing about a tool like ETM is we're going to have this connectivity between our requirements. So on this test case, we're going to say which requirements we're actually covering. We're also going to be able to execute a test script. We're also going to be able to then file a defect if we have any issues along the way. That's really the goal and objective as we go through this, is to be able to see where we're at and what we're doing. The other thing I want you to know, and you'll see this in the upper right-hand corner here, is we have configuration management turned on as well. So we're working with our 1.0 stream of test cases, requirements, and across our whole engineering assets here. This is important as we look at the different versions of requirements we may have going forward, but it allows our test cases to point to the right version of requirements, and you'll see later on that our defects will point to the right version of those requirements as well. So let's go ahead and run this simple test case here. The goal here is not necessarily to focus on the questions or the steps of this test case. I actually made this just trivially easy here. Is we just know that when you're using ETM, you're actually going through and you're checking a set of conditions. You're executing some tests, whether it's an automated test or oftentimes you're using a manual script like this. You're going to walk through and be able to have some issues, be able to identify steps that are being executed, and you might find out that, hey, we have a defect at step 2. You want to create a defect. Now, traditionally, what you'd want to do is be able to create this in your defect management tool. What's nice about OSLC, it allows us to be able to bridge that gap in between different types of tools. And so in this case, my defect management tool could be Rational Team Concert, or in this case, when I go to create a new defect, what you'll see is actually a Jira form. And so this Jira form is actually using this OSLC standard, allows me to be able to automatically create a defect. It's going to populate information. It knew that I need to create a bug because I was creating a defect. It gave me some details about my test steps that we're on, and I can go ahead and create that item immediately from within my ETM tool. So I'm not navigating over Jira, I'm creating that artifact, and lo and behold, I also can be able to see that artifact, have a rich preview, see that information from Jira natively within my ETM environment. So this gives you that tight integration. So for those of you that are running your test cases in IBM, your software team that might be reviewing these defects is in Jira, this is a fantastic way for us to be able to share that information, be able to have tracking and have details on it. Now, if I look and show the result, the nice thing here is that I have captured all the results in terms of my test case, what actually I ran, what the record is, so the results of that, as well as if I look at my defects, you're going to see that I have my Jira defect here. Now, what we talked about before is one of the basic user values here is navigation. So the nice thing about having OSLC here is not only do I have those rich previews, but just by clicking on that artifact, I'm going to navigate over to Jira. So it's not like I've actually been between different tools. It's actually that I can have this smooth navigation as I go from my IBM tool chain over to Jira and back again. I have access to that. And the same thing goes from within Jira now. You're going to see that I have access to these artifacts. Now, I haven't looked at any ETM artifacts within Jira in this session yet, so it's going to ask me to log in. This is part of the authentication process to be able to make sure I'm not giving any information that somebody shouldn't have. I can trigger a login process that's going to happen. It's going to happen once per session, but once I do that, you'll see that I have access to that test case. You'll even see hints of that it had failed previously. So I have results and access to that information, and I can navigate back over to ETM at any point to be able to see the details of that. The other thing you'll note is that now not only do I have a link back to ETM, but I also have a link back to that requirement, so that was automatic from when I created this defect from within ETM. I also made sure that I put a link on there to be able to say, this is the requirement that test case was failing. So somebody who's in Jira is going to be able to see this information, be able to have knowledge of what's actually going on. So it's a nice way to be able to have that. And in fact, just like what we did before, if somebody wanted to be able to navigate over into my DOORS Next environment, I can just by clicking that button. I'm going to navigate over to that artifact within DOORS Next, and lo and behold, you're going to have access to that information. Now, the nice thing here is that you'll see that all the power that we've had before about having visibility to artifacts across the IBM lifecycle is also here with Jira. So you can see that we have different artifacts and different previews that I can be able to see within the Jira items as well, and be able to navigate and be able to see those artifacts. So it's the seamless flow that I can do back and forth between these, as well as I navigate it, you'll see that I retain the same version, this same configuration. So my tools are working together to be able to make sure I'm looking at the right artifacts at the right times. Now, the other thing to pay attention to here is I can just as easily create artifacts from within the environment within Jira or within DOORS Next. So if I want to, I can go ahead and create a new link. So if I want to create, add a link to this artifact, I can go ahead and say, hey, maybe I want to create a story. You'll see that what's nice about OSLC, we have different picker views. So in the case that if I'm creating a link to another DOORS artifact, I'm going to see a DOORS interface. If I want to create, say, an implemented by, so this is a change artifact, you'll see a different picker that's going to be associated with the source tool. So this is what we're providing into the enterprise, that you can have this picker to be able to go pick an existing Jira artifact, or I can go about and say I want to create a new artifact, and you'll see some differences here. Now in this case, I actually have defaulted to create a story because I'm going to create a story from an implementation request. So I can go ahead and create some details, some description maybe, and be able to create some content about that and be able to create that artifact live as we're looking here. And we're going to be able to see that artifact, be able to navigate that artifact. Here it's live within this environment. And so this is a nice way to be able to see that I can interact back and forth. I can go back into my Jira environment and be able to see this artifact, see this link. Now, one of the other things that I want to have you look at here, and we mentioned it a couple of times, is that this configuration management concept. And so configuration management allows me to know which version of an artifact that I'm working with. But we know as we're working with our change request or things like that, we might actually change which version we're working with. So you'll see along the way that if I change my version, so my version that I'm targeting for this implementation request, you can actually see this version of this requirement change. You'll see right now that I'm working with 802.11g. If for some reason I decided that I wanted to be able to maybe work in a later release, say this feature got pushed out later to my 1.1 release, you're going to go ahead and see what happens with OSLC from the standpoint of configuration management. You'll see this requirement description changed. The requirement itself didn't change, but the version of the requirement did. And so this allows my Jira users to always have the right version of that artifact, access to that right version of that artifact. If I actually went and said, I want to open this link in a new tab, you'll see that I'm going to actually be working in the 1.1 version of that release and not the 1.0. All that activity that goes around in the background is managed by our implementation within Jira. As well as we know, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to get used to this, to be able to know how this works and how this maps. So we actually provide some features in here to be able to understand, oh wow, if I want to know what version of the configuration management I'm working with, I can hover and it will tell me which version of the GC. If I want to know more, I can hit that question mark, and then we're going to describe to you why we said that that's the version you should be working with based on your link type, based on which versions you have, what your mapping is to your GC. It's providing all those details for you to be able to have access to that information. And so we're trying to be able to make that visible to you, have access to that. The other thing that I want to point out here is not only do we allow you to be able to create links from, say, the IBM tools that you've seen, you'll also be able to create those links back into those other tools. So in this case, you'll see this collaboration link option here. It allows me to be able to say, maybe I want to create, in this case, another implementation request. And I can go ahead and be able to see that, be able to navigate to an existing artifact. And you're going to see the Doors Next dialog pop up here so that I can have access to those types of artifacts that I might want to link to, and simply can create a link by selecting a couple of these objects, hitting OK. I'm going to link to those artifacts for you. So whether I'm working natively in Jira or if I'm working natively in the Doors Next environment, I can see both of those directions just as seamlessly and be able to create those links. Now, the other thing that's important as we look through here is not just that I can create those links, and creating links is valuable to give this navigation, this traceability, but we also want to be able to report on those links. And so, for example, within this environment, within the IBM environment, I have a tool called Report Builder. It allows me to be able to create some simple reports, but the power here is, and you'll see I'm going to run a report, and it's going to work in this AMR 1.0 context that I was working with before. What's going to be nice about this is it's actually going to natively go through and be able to pull information, so requirements that take place within my Doors Next environment, and be able to have access to that. It's going to have quality management results. It's also going to have my Jira issues as well. So it's going to have all those things together so that I can have access to those interface and those details at any time that I want to be able to access that information. It's immediately up to date. I can access those artifacts whenever I want, and allows me to be able to fulfill my need for reporting. And the thing that I want you to keep in mind as we look at this is actually what's happening behind the scenes in that tracked resource set that I was talking about. Because what happens here, I want to look at the core behind this, is that we actually are supporting trace relationships and Jira issues as native into this report builder tool. So if you want to create relationships between requirements, your Jira issues, and your QM results, you have access natively to those Jira issues, as well as when we go ahead and format those results. If I want to add another attribute here, you'll see that on my Jira artifact, I have attributes that I can add to that report and be able to bring in there. And we allow you to be able to customize which of those attributes that you're using in those reports and which ones you're publishing from Jira that have access in here. So it has this full traceability to be able to leverage that. And so ideally, that gives you a good feel of what we're trying to accomplish, what we're doing, how deeply this is embedded within the environment. Now, a couple things that I did want to bring up before we jump into some Doors elements as well. We do, but behind the scenes, allow a lot of different types of configurations. So you'll see a little bit from the admin side of this as well. When you saw me creating a link from the Jira side, you see lots of different relationships that I can create. We do support you to be able to customize that, meaning that you can set what your default link relationship is. You can customize which of these OSLC link relationships you might want to provide on a certain artifact. You have flexibility to be able to do that. The other thing that we talked about was that, hey, when I created an artifact from within ETM, I created a bug. When I created an artifact from within Doors Next, I created a story. The reason why that happened was this configuration that we allow here, which is to say that I can say for a defect, this is the artifact type I want. For an implementation request, this is the artifact type that I want. So no matter what your scheme is within Jira, you're going to be able to customize that and have the experience that your users really want to be able to have and have access to. And then the last thing to put out there, for those of you that are getting into the advanced features that we have within Doors Next, one of the ones that we really encourage for our teams that are doing critical systems, they have to have reviews. What Doors Next allows much more control of these different versions, these streams of activities, in terms of saying, hey, for each edit that we have, we need to have a change set. And even better, we want to be able to make sure that we have an approved change request. That change request can be a change request from Jira, as well as within our configuration, we allow you to be able to identify what an approval means to you, which might be a certain state of a Jira item, it might be certain attributes on the Jira item. you have capability to be able to define what that is so that you can make sure that your users are reviewing their changes that they're doing within the DOORS Next environment prior to them being able to deliver that and share those with others. So if you want more information on that, just let us know. We're happy to be able to dive deeper into that. But we're trying to touch on a few different tools today and be able to give you a preview of that.